Today we have
Hi,
Gordon Griffin on the podcast. It's lovely to have you on, Gordon. How are you?
I'm good. I think, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Good, good.
Absolutely fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah. Enjoying all these wonderful Zoom chats that I'm having at the moment. It's brilliant. Yeah, so it's absolutely wonderful to have you on today, Gordon. Gordon
Thank
is
you.
an incredible person. He's achieved so much. He's an MBE. He's been recording audiobooks for so many years now, 921 and counting, according to his website, which is phenomenal. Back in 2017, he received an MBE, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later on. It's fabulous to have you here today, but let's start by telling everyone how we actually got to know each other. So you can go for it if you want.
Well, it's kind of a complicated story, but amongst all the other things that I did and do, I was the casting director for the English Theatre of Hamburg, which is a fantastic organization that does plays in English using English actors or UK actors. And I worked there. I'd been doing a lot of television, and I wanted to do a theatre job. I wanted to play a big part, the kind of part where you have to carry the play. And I said to anybody who would listen, offer me a part, I'll go anywhere. I'll go and rep. I want to have a really big part on the stage with an audience. And the English Theatre of Hamburg was casting. And I rather liked the idea of doing a play in another country, getting to know another country, another city. And so I accepted this part. It was a terrific part. And I went to Hamburg for, it was about 3.5 months over the winter period in the 80s. And I got on well with the guys who ran the theatre. And when I came back to London, I got a call from them to say they were casting a children's play and they didn't have time to come over to the UK because they were so busy with the evening shows. And would I cast it? Which was a bit daunting at first. But then, of course, I thought, well, I do know a lot of people. And so the long and the short of it was that I sent these actors off to Hamburg that the directors had never met at this point. And they went off to do the play. And not only were they very good actors, but they were very nice people. They all got on very well with each other. And so it was a success. So they eventually asked me if I'd like to be the permanent casting director for the English Theatre of Hamburg. And that was casting 4 plays a year. And what was miraculous over these 30 years that I did this was that I was able to carry on doing my other work, my voice work, my theatre work, my television work, and fit in the casting as well. So the answer to the question about how I met you was we were casting and I auditioned you and you went to Hamburg. That was the connection.
And that was a fabulous time for me. That was back in 2010, and which is 11 years ago now. That's quite staggering. I can't believe it.
Oh, that really is. Did you just do the one play?
No, I did two. I did the one in
you did
2010.
Yes, you did a play.
Yes. So I did Deadly Game, and then that was 2010, and then Stone Cold Murder, 2013. And that was a great time. I love Hamburg. It's a beautiful city, and it was fun. The directors are wonderful there at the English Theatre of Hamburg, Bob and Cliff. Big shout out to those guys. And they do fabulous work. And every
struggling
year,
like all theatres, they're struggling at the moment because of course they're not open.
Yeah,
and they didn't have massive budget or anything like that. So, like all theatres, we just have to hope that this pandemic ends sooner rather than later and we can get back to work. And of course, Brexit hasn't helped at all.
No, absolutely. No, it's been tricky, and particularly for actors who are from the UK, it's proving quite a challenge. And you were casting. How many years were you casting for at the English Theatre of Hamburg?
I think it was about I think my first one in 1990, Ooh. And I finished because of Brexit. I finished last year when they could no longer use UK actors.
Yeah.
I mean, that was fine. I was thinking of giving it up anyway because I've been doing it for such a long time, and so and also my other work really was it was taking up quite a lot of my time. So, but it was a fantastic experience. I loved Hamburg. I loved and I still will continue when we can to go back there, go and see the actors, still support the theatre in every way that I can, and I'm still there to help with. Casting advice and anything like that. So I haven't severed my connection at all.
No. Absolutely. And I would love to go back myself, not necessarily to be in the show. I mean, that would be great, but I would like to go over and watch a show and then go and enjoy the wonders of Hamburg as well. That would be brilliant. And hopefully
there's no reason why. I don't know what is your passport status, because that's what it's down to.
Well, my passport status is the UK at the moment, but as most or some people know, I'm living in Sweden now, so there's a possibility of getting a Swedish passport at some point. We shall see how it all pans out, and that might work in my favor in the long run. So we'll see. But yeah, good. So and you enjoyed casting the casting process. Something you enjoyed?
I did. I loved the casting process. What I liked very much was after we'd cast the play. I think the advantage I had as a casting director was being an actor myself. I was very much on the side of the actors, and so sometimes when an actor would walk in the room, I would think, no, they're not right, but I would still give them the full time, and so they would leave not thinking, oh, that was a bad, because you know as an actor yourself, you go into an audition and straight away they don't like you, or you're wrong, or whatever it is. And it's very frustrating, and you think, I've prepared for this, but the moment you walk in the room, you can get from them that they're not interested in you.
Absolutely.
And I think what I was able to do was be on their side and be sympathetic to them. And I would like to think that nobody came into an audition for me that didn't have a good experience, even if they didn't get the
Absolutely.
part.
I mean, I had a lovely experience, and it was such a relaxing environment to come into, and you were a very generous casting director and very kind. And I mean, going back to your point about walking into a room and them not liking you, I once went, I won't mention the name of the show, but I auditioned for quite a big TV project actually, and I don't believe the casting director actually looked up from the page once, and it was just it was a painful experience. I'd prepared for it a lot, and I'd learned the lines.
It's outrageous, and it's not how it should be.
No.
It really I can't think of any other job where you'd get such treatment.
No.
And just accept it. It's really, really bad.
No, it's staggering that can happen. I mean, I hope that's not a regular thing, but that was. I've had a lot of enjoyable casting experiences, but that was not one of them for sure. But anyway, let's move on. So so Gordon is a phenomenal actor and a voice artist and a narrator.
And before the terrified housekeeper could interfere, he had fallen upon his knees and was rapidly scouring the floor with a small stick of what looked like a black cosmetic. In a few moments, no trace of the bloodstain could be seen. "I knew Pinkerton would do it!" he exclaimed triumphantly, as he looked round at his admiring family. But no sooner had he said these words than a terrible flash of lightning lit up the sombre room. A fearful peal of thunder made them all start to their feet, and Mrs. Umney fainted. "What a monstrous climate," said the American minister calmly, as he lit a long cheroot. "I guess the old country is so overpopulated that they have not enough decent weather for everybody. I have always been of opinion that emigration is the only thing for England. My dear Hiram, cried Mrs. Otis, what can we do with a woman who faints? Charge it to her, like breakages, answered the minister. She won't faint after that. And in a few moments Mrs. Umney certainly came to. There was no doubt, however, that she was extremely upset, and she sternly warned Mr. Otis to beware of some trouble coming to the house. I have seen things with my own eyes, sir, she said, that would make any Christian's hair stand on end. And many a night I have not closed my eyes in sleep for the awful things that are done here. Mr. Otis, however, and his wife warmly assured the honest soul that they were not afraid of ghosts, and after invoking the blessings of Providence on her new master and mistress, and making arrangements for an increase of salary, the old housekeeper tottered off to her own room.
How is that for you as a narrator for audiobooks? Is that something that you really enjoy doing, or you just feel that it's something you're good at, or a combination of the two?
Well, I certainly wasn't my plan to record 900 audiobooks.
No.
It never was my plan for it to. I was an actor. I am an actor. And the audiobook thing just kind of took over. I started when the audiobooks, when they were called talking books, I got my first work then, and just carried on doing it and carried it to such an extent that I was not able to do any other work. I was booked up, weeks ahead to do audiobook, and suddenly that took over. But it wasn't my plan to break records, or to, certainly the idea of recording nearly 1,000 audiobooks was never part of my plan. Yeah. However, I'd done a lot of radio, and I came into it via radio, which I liked very much. I like the idea that it's just your voice, and I like the idea that in radio, it doesn't matter what you look like. It's what you sound like. And my very first radio job was in the late 60s, when I played a 16-year-old boy in a radio soap opera at the time called The Dales, or Mrs. Dale's Diary, as it had been called. And I played a 16-year-old because I was able to sound like a 16-year-old. And in fact, I was in my early 20s or something at the time. So that was amazing for me. The fact that it didn't matter what you looked like, it was what you sounded like. And if you were the person listening, had no idea what you looked like, but they could imagine you in the character. And I think a very good example of how radio works in a completely different way from television, say, was there was a very popular series on television with Wendy Craig bringing up 3 of her teenage sons. And it was on television, very successful. And so they decided to do it on radio. And the same actors, the same scripts. And the boy who was playing the 15-year-old, when you watched him on television, there he was. He was a 15-year-old, you could see it. When he did it on radio, he had a kind of, his voice had broken, obviously, and he had a kind of gravelly voice and talk like that. And he sounded so much older, but he was the right age, but didn't sound it. So here was me, who was the wrong age, but did sound it. And that was the kind of a revelation in a kind of way, that you could do anything in radio. It didn't matter. And because I could convincingly sound like a teenager, I got to play loads and loads of teenagers, but it worked to my advantage when Radio 4 did a huge production of Romeo and Juliet. And they wanted the Romeo and Juliet to be the right ages, that is to say 16 and 15. But of course, they weren't looking at the actors who were going to play it. They were listening to them. And aged whatever I was, 30 or 31 or 32, I played Romeo. So that was the fascination for me of radio. It didn't mean that I only wanted to be on radio, but it meant that when audiobooks started to happen, then it was natural for me to go into that, because when you're on the BBC Rep, that is to say a group of actors who are contracted to do radio for the BBC, it means that you're not just in plays, but you're farmed off to do a book about poetry, a program about poetry, or I did an arts program called Kaleidoscope. And it meant that whenever they were reviewing a book, whatever the book was, I'd go to the studio, the director would say, this is what the book we're going to be reviewing today. He'd tell me what the story was or what the book was about. I'd read extracts from it. And when they came into the studio, they would discuss the particular book by playing extracts that I'd read. So already the storytelling element was involved in the work that I did in radio. And even in television, although I played lots and lots of parts on television as a young actor, I was suddenly presenting Play School. I was suddenly telling stories on Rainbow. I'm not quite sure how that happened. So the storytelling element almost accidentally happened. So as I say, that all led me, although I didn't know it at the time, to this newfangled thing called talking books. And I got my foot in the door, and it's been there ever since. And as I say, eventually, there was more and more companies started up. I was recording for all these companies. And so suddenly my diary was full of work, which was fantastic. But it did mean eventually that I had to give up doing the theatre and the television work because I simply had no time. The only way I could do that would be to give up completely the audiobook work. It was impossible to do both.
Yeah, I mean, it is truly remarkable the work that you've done, and the audiobooks themselves. They are, a lot of the stories you're doing are huge, epic tales. How is that in terms of, how long does it take to actually, from start to finish, to create one of those stories? Because I presume you're doing a lot of the work. I mean, we can talk about this a little bit as well, like, because at some point you were working in studios, but obviously because of COVID and Corona, I know for myself, I'm now doing a lot of work from home, and I presume it's a similar case for yourself. So how long does that all take now for you to create this?
Yeah, well, if you're recording in a studio, then of course you have a certain set of time when you've got to record. So an ordinary sort of thriller or an ordinary novel would take me about a day and say a day and a half, 2 days at the most. If you're doing what are the big classic books, for example, Tale of Two Cities I've done, 1984, these books, or something like Homer's Odyssey, I mean, that's going to take a very long time to record. It's not so much the recording that takes time, it's the preparation.
Right.
And every book needs to be prepared. And if I'm doing Homer, or if I'm doing the biography of Alan Turing, for example, which I did, it's incredibly complicated, especially for somebody who's a numerate like I am. So the preparation takes ages. Every book, the most important thing you need to know as a narrator is preparation is everything. And you really have to prepare the book so that when you go to the studio, you know the book as well as you can do. And then it makes the recording so much easier, because when you turn the page, you know exactly what's going to happen next. Yeah. I don't go with this thing where I've heard some narrators say, oh, but I'm very, very good at sight reading. I don't need to read the book thoroughly. I can skim read it. Or I've heard some narrators will go into the studio not having read the book. Well, I'm a good sight reader too. I could just take any book here that I've never read before, and the producer could say, okay, we're going to record this. Okay, page 1. And some instinct would kick in, and I would probably be able to get through it, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as good as if I prepared it. And there'd be lots of mistakes. And is this the right voice? Is that the right? Because but if you do all that preparation beforehand, it makes the job so much easier. And by preparation, I don't just mean reading the book once. I mean, funnily enough, the most common thing people say to me when they know what I do is, do you have to read the book first? Which seems to me incredible. What do they think? You just go in, open the book and think, okay, here we go, let's record it. No, of course you do. And sometimes not. You have to sometimes read the book more than once. When I was doing the Turing book, for example, I spent, I would say, days reading all the formulae and all the complicated, it was quite a technical book. And it was no good for someone who's absolutely useless at anything to do with figures. It was no good me going in, busking it. I had to know what I was talking about, or else the people listening wouldn't know what I was talking about. So preparation is everything. And so something like the Homer, I think it took about 8 days to record, because it's massive. Yeah. But when I went into the studio, say 8 days in the studio, but about 3 or 4 weeks before that, preparing it, working it out, deciding how the characters are going to sound. So it's the preparation which is the most important thing. My nephew once said to me, "You've got a really cushy job because all you do is go into a studio and tell stories." And in one sense, he's right, because that is the easy bit. You've done all the work, you've done all the preparation. So that going into the studio you should be relaxed, you know what you're doing. And in one sense, he is right, because that is the easy bit. You're just putting into practice all the work that you've done beforehand.
Nice. Okay, so preparation in terms of reading the book, in terms of thinking about the characters and how you're going to actually voice those characters. How about in terms of your physical and your vocal preparation for a job that can take hours, can take days? Because I know from my own experience, it can start to take its toll on you if you're talking for a long period of time, even if you do warm up and prepare. What is your process in terms of getting your voice and your breathing and your physicality ready to take on a job, a huge epic tale like that?
I think I wish that I was able to say, this is the technique that you have to use. With me, it's always been instinctive. I think I must have been very well trained at drama school, breathing and how to produce the voice, because people often ask, how do you do it? How is it that every single day you're recording from, say, 9 to 5 or 10 to 5, whatever the studio is? How is it that your voice survives all that? And my answer was always, I don't know. It just does. And how you still have the same vocal energy at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that you have when you started at 9 o'clock. And I don't know the answer. And I still really don't know the answer. As you said before, I'm now recording from home, which is something I never planned to do. And that is, that's made me much more conscious of the voice. And so I do warm-ups. I do drink a lot of water. But I don't think there's a magic formula to say this will keep your voice going. So it's a question I can't really answer, because I don't analyze it. But I look after the voice. I don't smoke, for example. I don't go to noisy places. I don't overuse it. And when I'm doing a really long, complicated book, then I really relax in the evenings. I don't go out. I take it very seriously. I will talk. In the evenings, I won't talk at all if I don't have to. I mean, what I mean is I won't phone people up, and I'll just, and I won't go to restaurants. That's only when I'm working. Otherwise, I'm just social as anybody else. But that's the only way I look after my voice. I try not to worry about it too much. I know some people have potions and lotions and gargling, and, which works for them. But I have to say that let me put it this well. And no, I'm not going to tempt it. I was going to say I've never so far had to abandon a book but I'm not going to say that anymore. Touch wood. And of course, as you get older, the voice gets older too. But I don't have any magical technique about this is what you have to do. Not at all.
Okay. What about in terms of, because I know in the small amount of narration that I've done is nothing compared to you, but pronunciation of certain words. So it could be names, it could be places, it could be a particular accent or a dialect. Do you have any tales around that in terms of how you when you read through a script and then you come across a word that you have no idea how it's meant to be pronounced, or how do you come around that challenge? Because I find that very difficult, having to sort of search online endlessly.
It's certainly a lot easier. Well, first of all, the thing is to say is that, as I say before, preparation is everything, and preparation does involve checking out all the pronunciations of any words that you don't know. I always say that if you're 90% certain this is how you pronounce a word, it's not enough. You've got to check to make sure you're absolutely right. And if you are absolutely right, you haven't wasted any time, but you might just be wrong. And so if in the book you're recording, there's say a village in North Wales, or if there's a town in Uzbekistan, you might think nobody's going to know exactly how that's pronounced. Somebody will.
Yeah.
So you've got to check it out. You really have to check it out. It's really difficult. And in the days when I was recording before the internet, that was really hard, because it sometimes meant go to the local library and going through all the big volumes of dictionaries to find the pronunciation of the word you wanted, because it didn't come into just an ordinary dictionary. Or you'd phone up the tourist office of, say, I don't know, Vietnam, to get a certain pronunciation. You had to do that sort of thing. I remember I did a book which had lots of Icelandic words in it. And I phoned up this Icelandic tourist office, and this woman was incredibly generous with her time and went through everything. And luckily, one of the great things I learned at drama school was phonetics. So I can write down what someone pronounces, and then I can reproduce it myself. But it is tough, and it is very difficult. And I once did a book that had Cornish in it. And I don't mean the accent, I mean the actual language, which is a dead language, you know. And so what do? And this is again before the internet. So I had this brainwave, and I found the number of the Penzance Public Library. And I just said to this lovely lady at the other end of the phone, do you know anyone who speaks Cornish? And she said, well, I'm learning it. I said, hooray. So she was able to give me the pronunciation, but also tell me what the words meant. And this was, as I say, then now, of course, you'd go on the internet and you'd find out, not always very reliable, but you'd find out, you put in the word and say, how do you pronounce this? Right. And someone will probably tell you. But it's much better to get it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So if I'm doing a Norwegian book, it's much better. It's a book that's got Norwegian in it, at least. It's better to talk to someone who's Norwegian or Hungarian or whatever it happens to be. I came across only once, I think, really, where I was really stuck. And I was doing a lovely series of books about a Mallorcan detective called Alvarez, and a lovely character, beautifully written books by someone called Roderick Graham, who's English but lives in Mallorca. And this was ages ago, before I really understood that in Mallorca they don't speak Spanish. Mostly, well, they speak Spanish, but it's not their main language. And in one of the books, they talk about a very rare fungus, which it's like a mushroom, and it only grows in Mallorca. And it had this incredibly long name. And I thought, I don't know how to pronounce this. I've got to check this, because in the story, they were chopping up this mushroom-like fungus and putting it into people's salads, the murderer, and making people very ill and even killing them. So it was important. This word came all the way through the book. So I phoned the Spanish tourist office and said, how do you pronounce this word? And they were very snooty and said, this is not a Spanish word. This is Catalan. This is what they speak in Mallorca, Mallorquin, which is a kind of Catalan, which has nothing to do with Spanish. Okay, fine. I'm sorry I disturbed you. Then I phoned a friend of mine who lives in Mallorca. He's Spanish, but he lives in Mallorca and he works in the catering industry. So I phoned him, and as I say, this is before the internet. I phoned him and I said, do you know this word? Have you come across this word before? No, he didn't. But he said, I know someone who probably will know. And he works in the tourist office in Palma, and he is a Catalan speaker. So I phoned Mallorca, phoned this guy. He was very nice. I said, I don't know this word. I've never come across it before. So I thought, there's only one thing I can do to sort out my problem. I needed this problem solved. I couldn't guess. So I phoned up, I got from his publisher, Roderick Jeffries' telephone number, the guy who wrote the book. And I phoned Roderick Jeffries, very nice guy. And I said, you know, I've recorded your books. I really enjoy them very much. He said, oh, yes, I enjoy listening to your recording. So we're on to a good start here. So I said to him, okay, this is the book. This is the word. I spelled it out for him. I said, okay, so how do you pronounce it? And he said, I've no idea. I made it up. So that wasn't very helpful, but at least I knew that. So together we worked out how he based it on real words, so we could work out how it might have been pronounced, but it was a made up word. And I wouldn't have known that, but I had to check to make sure that it wasn't. I was recording a book by Melvyn Bragg, and it's set in Cumberland, where he comes from. And they talk about a river, and the word, there's only one way it could be pronounced, so I thought. And I was preparing the book, and I thought, well, I don't need to check this. I looked at the word, I thought, but it worried me, it niggled me. So I phoned up the nearest town, Wigton or wherever it was, I can't remember. And I phoned the council officers, I think. And I said to the lady, just want to check, how do you pronounce this river? And I said, can you say that again? Because it didn't sound like anything like the word. I spelled the word again. She said, no, that's how we pronounce it here.
Oh, wow.
So just in time, I checked that out. So it was an object lesson to check everything out. You really must check everything out, because you may not be right. And it is difficult, and it is time consuming, but it's absolutely worth it. And I did a book had tons of Russian in it, great long lists of Russian names. And I did a crash course in Russian, but at least when I came to the studio, the names tripped off the tongue, and I was pretty fluent. And that's why you have to do it yourself. I know that there are some people who say, I'll get my producer to do that for me. And then the producer will phone up, get the Russian pronunciations, then will phone you up to give you the Russian pronunciations. Or even worse, you go to the studio and they'll say, oh, by the way, here are the Russian pronunciations. And you get this piece of paper and think, oh my God, you've got to do all this preparation first. You can't read. And then along came Nikolai, but you can't do that. You have to know it. But it means a lot of work beforehand, but it makes the recording so much easier. Another thing to say about that is that it's not, a good narrator is someone who gets really involved in the story and tells the story. It's not about not making mistakes. I think a lot of people think that a good narrator is somebody who doesn't make mistakes and who's really fluent. And I've heard producers say, we've got this fantastic new narrator who absolutely never makes mistakes. That's not what it's about at all. You're going to make mistakes. You get involved in something and you make mistakes. The only thing I would say about that is that if you keep on making mistakes, then you lose the rhythm. All books have their own kind of rhythm to them. And once you lose the rhythm, what happens is, if you stumble, make a mistake, you'll find that you'll make about 3 or 4 mistakes around about the same time and then get back into the rhythm of it again. But it's not, so it's better not to make mistakes, but it's not the end of the world if you do. And I know it throws a lot of people. You've just got to forget that, just carry on and get back into the swing of things, and then it works, keeping the flow going. So that's the secret about narrating is the preparation, but also, and this I think is very important, you have to have acting skills. When I used to go and do my talk around the countryside about recording audiobooks, so many people afterwards would come up to me and say, I've been told I have a nice voice. I'd like to do what you do. And there's no reason why they shouldn't, except I do say the question, have you got good ears? Doesn't matter. With both ears, for preference, both ears should be pretty good. So you can pick up nuances about the way people speak and also be good at doing accents, because you're going to be getting every single accent under the sun. You don't get fazed by that. And you don't have to overdo it. I mean, if you're playing a Scottish character, he doesn't have to sound like Billy Connolly. It's all subtle. And I think this is the point. It's a subtle skill. It's somebody once described it as painting in watercolors, not great oil paints. And actors are probably the best people because it uses your acting skills, but also sometimes actors come a cropper because they want to perform. They want to act. They've got an audience, and it's about, here's a great opportunity for me to show off all the voices I can do. That's not it at all. It's very, very much more subtle than that. It's not this. Here is the wonderful story I want to tell you. It's much more. Come here. Listen. I've got this incredible story to tell you. It's really interesting. Come on this journey with me. It's much more that. It's much more subtle. And it's not about doing clever voices. It's not about that at all. I say that if somebody's listening to one of my books and they say, oh, I love the way he does that voice, then I failed. They shouldn't be listening to how I'm telling the story. They should be listening to the story itself. So I think that's another important thing to say, that it's not about me. It's not about the narrator. It's about, all I'm doing is interpreting what you've got, the writer on the one hand, and you've got the listener on the other hand. In the middle is you, which is a big responsibility, but your responsibility is to the writer. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what, people say to me sometimes, what happens if you get a book that you don't enjoy? And I say, it's absolutely irrelevant what I think about the book. It's nothing to do with me. I've got to interpret the book, whatever I think of it, in the best way that I can. I've got to give it all the conviction. And if the dialogue is not particularly convincing, I've got to make it convincing. If the leading character is this handsome hero and I think he's objectionable, it's irrelevant. I've got to make him the handsome hero. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's Dickens or some little romance set in a hospital, they still have to have the same, they still have to be real. Yeah. They have to be real. And that applies also to non-fiction books as well. Tell the story, bring the people in, even if it's some dry, boring stuff. It hasn't got to be dry. You've got to make it not dry. Absolutely. And bring in the audience, bring in the listeners, whatever the subject of the book
and understanding this, getting into the story, getting into the characters, and sort of almost forgetting that it's you, Gordon Griffin, voicing this story, but it's they completely forget that, and they get totally immersed into what you're delivering.
I think Warren, that's exactly what happens to the narrator too. When it's a very strange thing. What is great about recording audiobooks is it's just you in a studio on a microphone in another place somewhere else as the producer or the engineer. And if it goes well and you've got no distractions, then magic happens. You're telling the story, and you get so involved in it that sometimes there's this extraordinary feeling. It sounds a bit fanciful, but it's true. And I think other narrators agree with this, that it just, the characters come alive, and it's almost like you can sit back and let them get on with it. Yeah. Oh, they're having this lovely conversation. Oh, they're getting very dramatic here. Oh, and it's amazing. You'd almost sit back. You're involved, of course, because you're telling it. This can only happen, of course, if you really know the book backwards. But I've talked about this to other narrators, and they have the same experience. So it does mean that when you're involved in a story and you're really getting into it, and suppose you say the wrong word and you don't realize it, and your producer somewhere else clicks the button and says, "Oh, Gordon," you jump out of your skin. For a minute, you don't know where you are. Yeah. And you say, oh, yes, calm down. Okay, back to the story. It's you get so involved in it. And it is great. That's how it should be, I think.
Well, there we go. For all those young narrators out there, Gordon speaks with so much experience and knowledge on the subject, and preparation. That's the key. Read the story multiple times if you need to, until you know it back to front, inside out, and then the job becomes.
I would say to anybody who's been offered an audiobook, they may look in their diary and think, "Oh, I've got these 3 days when I can record it." It's not. Those 3 days are important, of course, but you must factor in the preparation time. Yeah. I won't take a book, even if I've got days free to record it, if I haven't got days free to prepare it. And I say to people, if they've got a book and they don't have time to do the preparation, then it really is better not to do the book, because your first book may be your last book. You may never get another book again. I've heard many examples of this, which I won't go into detail, of people who've got, "Hooray, I've got my first book," and they phoned me up and said, "I'm really excited, I've got my first book." And I said, "Well, now you must work out your schedule for practicing, for preparing." And they say, one guy said, "Well, no, I've got I won't have it, I won't be able to have read it before I go to the studio." He told me afterwards, I said, "Let me know how it goes." He was booked for 3 days. And he said, "We did it in 5. And he said, "I don't think they minded." I thought, I think they minded probably quite a lot, because 5 days to do a little novel is, no. So you've got, I think people underestimate how how much work is involved.
All right, let's it's fascinating stuff, and there's so much more that we need to talk about, because your life is pretty incredible, Gordon. So in 2017, as I mentioned at the beginning, Gordon received an MBE for his service to the audiobook world, which is an incredible achievement. Can you talk to us about that experience of meeting the Queen, of actually receiving this award for all the work that you've done? I mean, I can only imagine it would have felt incredible, but it would be nice to hear from you as to how it was.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I got a letter in the post which looked very, very ominous, very, very formal. And to be honest, I was sitting here at my desk and I put it to one side and I thought, I'm not going to open that yet. It looked, I couldn't imagine what it would be, but it looked very, very formal and made me a bit scared. So a couple of days later, it was still on my desk. I thought, I've got to open this. I made myself a coffee and thought, okay, prepare for the worst. I opened the envelope and looked at this message, and it was saying, we'd like you if you'd like to accept the NMBE. And it was completely unexpected, completely, mind-blowing. I couldn't believe it. I read the first sentence about 3 or 4 times, and what? But you know how when you're younger, you think, of course, if I was offered something like a knighthood or an MBE or something, I would turn it down. You know, I don't believe in all. But of course, it took me about 2 seconds to say, I will accept it. I accepted it, of course, partly for a little boy growing up on Tyneside, in fishmonger's son from Byker in Newcastle, who wanted to be an actor from the time he was, before he even knew what an actor was. He just knew as soon as he went into a theatre aged about 5 or 6, this is what I want to do, without even knowing what that meant. And everybody at that time, growing up in the 50s with a Geordie accent, me, of course, I'm talking about, everybody was saying, you can't be an actor, with your voice. Because in those days, it was impossible. This is before Albert Finney and Tom Courtenay made northern accents popular, but long before anybody even knew what a Geordie accent was outside of Newcastle. And so I accepted it for that little boy who was so determined he was going to do it. He was so convinced, and he didn't listen to any of these people who say, you can't do this, you can't, this is not going to be what you're going to be able to do. And he went for it. And I thought, this is for him. This is why I'm accepting this. Lovely. But I also accepted it for the industry, because when I first started, people were rather disparaging about recording audiobooks. They didn't think it was a proper job. Many people said to me, oh, you record books for the blind, don't you? In a very disparaging way. And a lot of actors wouldn't do it. They didn't think it was, as I say, a proper job, or they would do it between other proper jobs, a fill-in. Now, of course, it's so different. Everybody wants to, the things that most actors say to me more than anything is, how do I get into this world that you inhabit? And the answer is, it's really hard now. I got in early, and I was very happy to. It was another job for me, and I loved it. But you were asking about the Queen. Well, I'd been told by very good authority that I wouldn't get the Queen. By that time, she wasn't doing it very much, almost not at all. It's an hour and a half. About an hour and a half, 2 hours. Well, she's got to stand there and see all these people one after the other. And so the person I knew who worked at Buckingham Palace said, it'll be obviously Prince Charles or Prince William and maybe Princess Anne, but it won't be the Queen. So that was okay, because, well, I'd like to, of course, be nice to have the Queen, but I thought that's okay because you have to learn all the protocols. You have to say, Your Majesty when she first speaks to you, then ma'am, to rhyme with jam, it says in the note. That's what you've got to do. Not mom, but ma'am. No. All these things, walk backwards. Incredible. All this stuff. And I thought, well, I don't have to worry about that. I was not going to be the Queen. So I arrive on the day. We're in this incredible gallery. All of us were going to get the awards, various awards, drinking water. And very nice water, royal water. Royal water, yeah. Yes. And I saw this guy with lots of medals standing there, some sort of usher. And I just said to him, who actually is doing the ceremony today? Because I didn't know. And he said, it's the Queen. And I almost said to him, no, it's not the Queen. I have very good authority that it's not the Queen. And he showed me the program of all the people who are going to be given it. And on the front, it mentioned Her Majesty the Queen.
Incredible.
So that suddenly made me terrified. Because what have I got to remember? I've got to say, Your Majesty. I've got to say, Ma'am. I've got to walk backwards. I hadn't rehearsed all that in my head. And I'm not someone who gets nervous about performing. I've learned to, as long as I can rehearse, I'm absolutely fine. Whatever it is, as long as even if it's a best man speech, as long as I can rehearse it, I'm fine. But of course, you can't rehearse this. You can't say, can we do it again? So I was so nervous, but she was lovely. And I talked about audiobooks, of course, and she listened. She looked at me with those beautiful eyes of hers, and she didn't take her eyes off me for a moment. And I made her laugh. And I had to mind you, I think she had no idea what an audiobook was, because I said to her, I think it's fantastic that it's something that's natural. People, when they're very, very small, like to have stories told to them. And there was a very long pause, and she said, yes, I suppose they do. Because I don't think I think it suddenly hit me that probably when she was very little, nobody had read stories to her. But it was an incredible event, extraordinary. It didn't mean anything. I mean, the fact that I'm an MBE means nothing at all. I mean, what does it mean? But it as I said before, it was something that it was not, in a kind of way, it wasn't something that I think, oh, great, shoved away in a drawer somewhere. I'm not going to be able to use it. But it was I just think for all of us that all record audiobooks, all of us to recognize that actually being a narrator of audiobooks is part of this great profession that we belong to. It's not something peripheral, but it's part of it, I think. And I think that MBA, I was the first person to be given such an award just for audiobooks. A lot of people, a lot of actors have got it who are well known for doing audiobooks, but they get it for the whole body of work. I didn't get for anything except my audiobooks. All the other work that I did, it might have been significant or interesting or fascinating or wonderful, but I wouldn't have got an MBE for it. It was just because of my audiobook work. And so I thought that was something of an achievement, not just for me, but for all of us who work in the industry.
It really is. It's amazing. And on top of that, you also have an autobiography, which is incredible. And it's called Speaking Volumes. And and also you got to narrate your own audiobook version of that. It's incredible. So please tell us more about that.
One of the companies I record for asked me quite a few years ago if I'd go around to libraries and readers groups talking about audiobooks and reading extracts from books I'd recorded for that particular company. And to make it more interesting, I talked about my journey, how I, as this guy from Newcastle, became the person who recorded all these books. And it was full of anecdotes about working in a rep and about it was quite funny. And it was wonderful for me because recording wall-to-wall audiobooks, the downside is you don't have an audience, or at least you don't have an instant audience. You don't have any reaction coming back to you straight away. And so doing these talks was great. I didn't have any script. I was performing, in a sense, playing the part of me, talking to an audience. And it was great, great fun. I loved it. I loved the laughter. I loved when I was reading an extract from a book. I chose one extract, which is very dramatic, about a boy called Kurt, who comes back to his flat and finds the flat is empty. And he knows his partners. He doesn't know what's gone on. And I describe him going into his partner's room where it's his office. And I take the audience with me on this journey. And he's getting more and more nervous. And eventually he goes into the room. And on his desk, there's an envelope, and he knows that's significant. And he puts off reading the envelope, and I just take the audience with me. And it's a great feeling because they're waiting to know what's in that envelope. And he opens the envelope, he picks out the piece of paper, and he reads, "My dearest Kurt." And then I stop, and the audience is going, What happens? What's happened? And of course, that's exactly what it's about. It's taking them on a journey and then taking the carpet from under them. They want to know what happens next. That's the essence of telling a story. So I love doing those. And after the talk, sometimes people would come up to me and say, these are fascinating anecdotes. This is really interesting. You should make it into a book. And I never thought anything of it. And then about 3 or 4 years ago now, this lady came up and said the usual things. I think you should make this into a book. It's fascinating. It's informative, because you're talking about recording books as well as how you got into it. And the lady, the librarian, said, that lady was very nice, who was saying very nice things about, I should make it into a book. And she said, oh, do you not know who that lady is? She's a well-known writer lives in this area. And I thought, well, if a writer thinks I should make it into a book. And so I thought, maybe I'll try. So I expanded it, wrote it. The writing wasn't difficult. I found that quite easy, because based on my, the stories were the same stories. And I think I can write pretty well. Finding the time to do it took me months to write it. And I sent it off to about 3 different publishers. And eventually one came back and said, yeah, let's do it. And the company that organized the talks that I record for, they were the ones that came through and said, I think this is a story that should be told, and people would be interested who listen to audiobooks to hear about the process. And so they negotiated to do the audiobook version of it. And who's going to record the audiobook? Let's think, who would be the best narrator for this book? So of course it was me, and I recorded it. And that was a strange experience. Not particularly easy, saying my own words.
No, I can imagine that would be slightly odd. Yeah, for sure.
But I think I haven't actually, it only came out a couple of months ago. And I've listened to a bit of it, but I tend not to listen to my own stuff. But at some point, I will listen to the whole story. The trouble is, I'm working on the book and doing all the various versions and rewriting and so on. I thought, I don't want to, I know the story so well, I don't want to hear it yet again. I've got to, at some point, let this book go and let other people read it and listen to it. And no, it was a great achievement. And I'm very happy that it makes other people. It's had some very nice reviews. The reaction has been really, really good. And so that was very satisfying. It was a kind of an ending in a sort of way. But it just shows that you have to learn new things, new tricks all the time. I never thought I'd be recording from home. I'm not technically clever enough. And yet I've recorded last year, during the first lockdown, I started my very first book from home in my little studio here at home. And I've done loads of books since then. So I've got used to that. But I must say that I miss the studio experience, going to a studio, going to work, and having somebody else there, somebody else to talk to, somebody else, I miss that very much.
No, I can imagine.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. Where is the best place for people to reach out to you if they want to listen to your autobiography, if they want to listen to some of your stories that you've been talking about, if they just want to say hello?
Yeah, please do. My website's got everything you need to know, and it's also got a link so you can contact me by my email. My website is just simply gordongriffin.com.
Okay, easy.
Which is also my Wikipedia page too.
Amazing. Nice and simple. Great. Okay, good. So before we finish up, Gordon, because I know you're a very busy man, you're probably in the middle of recording as we speak, I'm sure.
Well, when we finish this, absolutely, I'll be going to my booth to record.
There we go.
Can't have a day off.
We're going to play a little game. It's Would You Rather, and I play it with all of my guests. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and if you can. Don't give it too much thought. The first thing that pops to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Number 1. Would you rather live in Antarctica or the Sahara Desert?
I'm somebody who dashes around all the time. I'm always dashing here and there. And I think in the Sahara and in the Antarctic, you wouldn't be able to do that much. I think I'd go for Antarctic. I come from the northeast anyway. The weather's rubbish. No, I mean it's very cold up there, but probably it'd be colder in Antarctic.
Probably
so, no,
a little bit.
I'd choose that. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Number 2, would you rather be poor and work at a job you love, or rich and work at a job you hate?
Well, riches don't mean much to me anyway. I would certainly hate to do a job I hated. So I'd do the job I love, okay. Which isn't particularly well paid anyway. But yeah, that's what I choose.
Very good, very good. Number 3, it's another money-based question. Would you rather be filthy rich and live 400 years ago, or be poor and live today?
Oh, I don't think I'd want to live 400 years ago. But I'd also not be interested in being rich anyway. That's not priority with me. I mean, today, the times we're going through now are not particularly great, are they? But 400 years ago, I'm trying to think what would be happening then. No, I'll go for now.
Okay,
I don't want the money.
Don't want the money. Okay. Number 4, would you rather spend 2 weeks stuck in a psychiatric hospital or at an airport?
Oh goodness. I don't mind it. I've had really bad experiences at airports, but I had once in Porto Airport, being there for about 13 hours overnight. Oh, terrible. But I don't mind airports, as long as you've got something to do, as long as you've got your laptop, as long as you've got some books. No, I would choose that.
Choose the airport. Okay. And last but not least, 5, would you rather babysit a crying infant for a day or have an unwanted house guest for a week?
I'll choose the baby.
Okay.
A crying baby. I don't think I've experienced a baby crying for a whole day.
I have, and it's painful.
Well, I think I'd choose that. Yeah, I'd probably choose that.
Choose the baby. All right, very good. Okay, we're wrapping up now, Gordon. Thank you so much for today. Okay. Before you leave, could you give us your final thoughts for today? Gordon Griffin's final thoughts for all of our listeners out there who have been inspired by our conversation. And something uplifting and positive about life, about attitudes. That would be truly the big one to end.
Is that all? Is that all?
Nothing major. Nothing major.
You haven't given me time to prepare for this. Okay, I'll go back to that little boy who that was me, and all the time, all through my life. When I was 13. I heard about a local rep in Northeast Tyne, a weekly rep, and they were looking for schoolboys to be in a play set in a public school during the school holidays, a professional company. I always envied the actor Jeremy Spencer, and he was in the West End doing a play about a boy king called The Sleeping Prince. And I auditioned for an amateur production with a very good amateur company in Newcastle for that part, the part that I'd always wanted to play. And here was the choice. I was also offered a very good part, as a schoolboy and a boy with a professional company. My instinct, even then, age 13, was to do the professional job, not because I got paid, but because this was where I did, not an amateur production, even though it was a wonderful part. So I say, follow your instinct. My instinct's always been pretty sound. Listen to advice from other people, but follow your instinct. I've always done that. And sometimes it's taken me, I've accepted some jobs that have taken me on strange journeys, but I've never, ever regretted that. And so that's what I would say. People will give you advice, but you have to be true to yourself and do what you think is right. You may be wrong, but that's the best way to do it. And for me, anyway, it's worked.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's a stunning final thought. Thank you so much, Gordon. I really appreciate your time and for coming on today. And I can't wait for this episode to come out. It's going to be amazing. And I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I have.
When I was recording the autobiography of Chris Bonington, Ascent, I was daunted by the massive list of words to check. Snowdonian villages, Gaelic ridges, Tibetan passes. Amazingly, with my producer's help, we found most of them online. I watched loads of YouTube films of Bonington's expeditions, hoping that someone would say the name I was at that time searching for. Once, pre-internet, I recorded a book that had 2 characters speaking Cornish. I don't mean the Cornish accent, but the actual language. I had a brainwave. I found the telephone number of the main public library in Penzance. I rang the number and said, rather plaintively, to the lady who replied, "Do you know anyone who speaks Cornish?" It was a long shot, but I'd struck gold. She replied, "Yes, I do. Well, at least I'm learning it." She was able to not only translate the words, it turned out to be the Lord's Prayer, but also to give me the pronunciations. Only once did I come to a dead end. Again, this was before the internet. I recorded a series of delightful books about a Mallorcan policeman called Enrique Alvarez. What I didn't realise then, but know now all these years later, was that someone like Alvarez would speak Mallorquin, a Catalan dialect, not Spanish. This particular story concerned a rare mushroom-like fungus that grows on the island. I can't now recall its name, although I remember it being, to me, unpronounceable. The point was, this fungus is highly poisonous and was being chopped up and used in food by some unscrupulous person to kill his enemies. The word appeared countless times. It was a critical part of the plot. It was vital I got the pronunciation correct. I phoned the Spanish tourist office, where a rather brusque man told me that the word was Catalan, and therefore had nothing to do with Spanish. I next phoned a Spanish friend who worked in the catering industry in Mallorca. He didn't know the word either, but he gave me the phone number of a friend of his who was from Palma and who worked for a travel company. Perfect! Another call to Mallorca. The friend was charming and apologetic. He couldn't help. He'd not heard of this rare fungus. Now what? Well, there was only one more thing I could think of. I needed to speak to the writer of the book, Roderick Jeffries. Although English, Jeffries lives in Mallorca, so it involved yet another call to the island. I explained who I was and that I recorded his books. I was able to say truthfully how much I enjoyed them. He was very courteous. He'd enjoyed my recordings, so we were off to a good start. I reminded him of the plot of the book that I was about to record, and then spelled out the word I needed to pronounce. My pen was poised, the receiver clamped to my ear. "How do you say it?" I asked. "I have no idea," he answered. "I made it up."